much, and really pleased to be part of this panel. And I'd say an illustrious panel, really crossing the banking community, the mobile network operator community, the government community, and the technology community. So really, I'm quite honored and thrilled to be part of this group overall. I think this topic, where do we stand on self-sovereign identity, couldn't be a more fascinating one. At this stage in the development of the market, we've all envisioned that this notion of people being able to take better control of their identity in a digital world is a really important one to people across the globe. It's an area that's developing. It's not fully gelled, but I think we're beginning to see the signs and signals that this is very, very likely the answer that we're going to be able to see for consumers, for passengers, for patients, and for our businesses as we go on in time. So over the next few moments, or the course of this hour, in fact, we'll address this topic. I'm going to quickly share my screen and give everyone kind of a view on how we're going to proceed today. We do very much appreciate and would like to see interactivity as we go. We'll be looking for audience questions as we progress. What we're going to do, we've decided to kind of lead off. Koti will begin with a quick address and a few slides, followed by Danielle, and then Antoine, and then Yvonne. Their perspectives on this topic. Where do we stand on self-sovereign identity, and what are they involved in within their organizations? We're going to try to take roughly 20 minutes at this, and to make sure that we leave time for panel discussion. Now, what we've teed up in the panel discussion are some provocative questions that I hope everybody in the audience finds quite interesting. The first, what do we think the killer app is for SSI? How do we get the ball rolling for people to be using this in their mainstream lives? So that'll be the first thing. The second, how do we get to scale? How do we commercialize? How do we get beyond the pilots that are occurring across the globe really right now in a number of segments and get to commercialization? The third thing is by way of public-private partnership. Is it important or is it not that government and the private sector begin to come together for the benefit of national and regional infrastructure? What's the evolution of EIDAS and SSI? And lastly, really the role of big tech. I do encourage questions. We will try to address those as we go, and or if we find more interesting questions than those that we've prompted up, will evolve. 2 seconds, just by way of my role. I'm part of MasterCard, have driven our digital identity service called ID, which is being piloted in a few places of the world. And then I would point out I'm part of the Trust Over IP Foundation, which is really developing a full stack set of standards, really looking at decentralized self-sovereign. Lastly, I had founded the group called the Good Health Pass Collaborative, looking at interoperability using some of these same techniques for international travel health pass. So that's about me, and that's about all you'll hear about me, because we want to turn now to the panelists. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point to Koti, and she'll make a few remarks to begin. Koti.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me today to participate in this session. I feel very honored for sharing the stage with so relevant speakers. As you know, I'm leading the Crypto and Blockchain Center of Excellence at Santander, but I'm here today because I'm sponsoring the Identity Commission of Alastria that has developed a self-sovereign identity model, and also because I'm participating in a collaborative project with other companies called Dalion that it's putting this model of Alastria into practice. I believe that most of you already know Alastria, but for those that are not familiar with it, Alastria is a multi-sectoral association, non-profit. I think it's the first national non-profit blockchain association in the world. It was set up with the aim of promoting the digital economy through the use of distributed ledger technologies. And it has over 500 members, from leading corporates and public institutions to small and medium enterprises. And it has built a public permission network that has already over 100 nodes. Since Alastria Foundation, in order to achieve legally binding transactions in this network, Alastria priority was building a digital identity mechanism for individuals and for corporates. And this model has been contributed by over 200 members, not only in the technical piece, but also in the legal and functional aspects. And it has been built in an open source format. In terms of standards and regulation, it has been recently approved by UNE. UNE is the Spanish standardization body, and probably it's the first official standardization organization that approves an identity standard based on DLT. Also, we've elevated this model to another standardization organization like the European CNELEC, and it is compliant with EIDAS in terms of the levels of assurance, and in terms of data protection, it facilitates the compliance with the GDPR, as this model provides a one-click data revocation process. It also preserves the privacy of the user. There's no personal information stored in the blockchain. What we are storing is the actions that are performed on those credentials, like the issuance, the registration, the request of information, and it's always encrypted using a double hash mechanism. So it guarantees that there's no traceability of the activity of the user. Also, it follows the W3 standards regarding verifiable credentials and decentralized identifiers. And in terms of interoperability, this model has inspired the European Commission in the design of the European Digital Identity Model, ESIF, under the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure. The solution that they have is evolving faster than ours, and we are going to follow their developments. There are several projects and initiatives that are following this model, or that their wallets are compatible with this model, such as Digitalis, Cabo Verde, but I would like to get into more details of Dalion. So Charles, if you can move to the next slide. And Dalion, it's a collaborative project. It's multi-sector between private companies. You've got some logos there, Banca March, Bankia, Caixa, Generali, Inetum, Liberbank, Línea Directa Aseguradora, Mafre, and Repsol. And the aim of this project is to put into practice a Alastria ID model, as we recognize that self-sovereign identity has benefits for both the users and for us, the companies. For example, for the users, this solution would allow them to access services immediately, providing greater control to them, as they will be able to know at any moment with whom they have shared their data. For the companies like Santander, it can improve the customer satisfaction thanks to a quicker onboarding and login, reducing churn rates and the information verification costs. So Dalion is complementing the work that we have performed in Alastria, adding new technical elements that are needed to operate, like the wallet and all the necessary pieces to integrate the business applications with the blockchain. Last year, we developed a proof of concept to demonstrate its technical viability, and now we are in the middle of the development of the MVP that we expect to have ready by mid-year. And last but not least, we have the honor in this project to count with observers from the Spanish public administration, as we believe that including both private and public sectors is the way to enable sufficient scale of adoption of a digital ID system like this one. In Dalion, we believe that collaboration is key, so we are open to welcome new participants. Thanks, Charles.
Koti, thank you. And your point about a collaboration, I could not agree more. It's just absolutely critical in this field. And companies and governments that have this DNA are really going to be successful. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. Danielle, I'd like to turn to you for your address. So the floor is yours, Danielle.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Danielle. I'm convener of the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework within the European Blockchain Partnership. And that is, as you might have learned in other sessions in this conferences or in previous conferences, the European Blockchain Partnership is a partnership of the 28 member states and of the Commission, plus Norway and Liechtenstein, that working together on several blockchain projects, mainly public driven and public organizations that want to collaborate. And one of the aspects that we do is next to building a European service infrastructure, which Kati also explained, also inspired by the things that are already happening in Europe, in Spain in particularly. We try to build a service infrastructure that extends and can support cross-border use cases. So several countries are working together to establish those kind of things, because most public sectors encountered that the use cases were rapidly extending their borders, and the main added value was indeed in that collaboration. One of the use cases that we tackle within that European blockchain partnership, which was, of course, in my view, but also in many views, the most interesting was how that blockchain could be an enabler, a facilitator for the new forms of identity. And therefore, we established that use case, but it's more than a use case, it's mainly a core services, how we can support a European framework on SSI. And that's why the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework established some 2 years ago, also inspired by different aspects. And we try to think, okay, how can Europe's facilitate this game? How can public sector help in the development of those kind of things based on that blockchain infrastructure? It evolved not only technical, functional, but it's also a big legal question and a governance question. So the European Commission, together with the member states, are tackling those diverse technical and legal questions to ensure that a new paradigm, that new possibility of decentralized identity can be used in that context. Because as you know, AI does its reviewing, we are looking at new forms of identity, but how can this be supported? And what kind of role does public sector needs to do that? We are now currently working at the version 2 of that system. So we released last year a version 1 of EPSI and ASIF that was mainly a demonstrator, get to know the technology, get to know where the constraints are, get to know where the things are. And then now we are working at a more stable version, version 2. Now the European Commission and the member states are not building the entire ecosystem. It's something that we do in collaboration. So I think this panel is a perfect illustration of those kind of things. We collaborate with Lastria, but we also collaborate with people like Yvonne from Validated ID, because the several components need to be built. We are providing within ASIF as the layer, the under layer that ensures the trust framework. But what the user chooses as a wallet, how does legacy system interact, that is up to the market, up to the different national things. So the ASIF is more a framework, but also a way to collaborate with different parties. We are now currently working on version 2 and now trying to implement this with the first parties. So what we have called the early adopters are now working with it, trying to see how this fits. If this model is okay, does it really integrate, so that we can gradually expand it. And of course, this is not only European, needs to be global. So we're also looking at mainly things, how does other parties in the world look at those kind of things. Always to enable that citizens to take control of his data in a secure way and a trustworthy way. But will implement also regulations that will also protect citizens. We're also looking at, but maybe that also will be highlighted in the next session, EPSI and EBP will be also check how we can link, because we are now currently looking at public sector driven, how can we collaborate more integrally, or private parties can also be a part of that infrastructure. So that will be the next challenge. And of course, the challenge that we have, how to link and integrate with existing networks like Alastria, like Trust over IP, that needs to be. Doesn't need to be in this decentralized world one big thing, but at least we need to have more interoperability and more agreements. So that's a bit an overview for what ASIF stands. And of course, keep in mind it is a part of the ecosystem, but we want as public sector to enable those kind of things.
Danielle, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the point as well about interoperability and the importance of looking as well to collaboration with that interoperability. I think it's really quite key, and the extension around the globe with a center from Europe where much of this is quite advanced, I think is very key. So really appreciate that. I'm going to now share my screen, and we're going to invite Antoine to make a few remarks. So Antoine, it is all yours. And I'm not sure about the other panelists. I can't hear Antoine.
Sorry, I switched my mic. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Charles. I'm the leader of the Orange Business Services program about blockchain. We are working since 5 years in Orange on blockchain use cases. In particular, for me, I'm searching the use case we can implement for our B2B customers. So we have already some projects in blockchain. We have NoCP, which is a spin-off of Orange to manage commercial paper, which is treasury bonds around between big company. Or communication are certified on orange.com website, and we use blockchain on the field to track the fiber reel for fiber deployment in France. But now, since 2 years, we are focused on self-sovereign identity. Why? Because we think it's the settlement to build the internet of trust, to see large network of blockchain where each people is identified with a legally recognized identity. So if you want to go to the next slide, thank you, Charles. So we have a big project since 1 year now. It's a co-innovation project with AgData Hub, which is a consortium of 30 company around agriculture. And our goal is to deploy self-sovereign identity for French farmers. There is around 250,000 farmers on farms in France, so it will be a huge project. And the main goal is to protect the data of the farmers. So with this identity, they could manage their consent on data, and we can track who is the owners of the data. And once this identity will be deployed, we will imagine with them a large amount of use cases like administrative declaration, exchange bills with their suppliers, a lot of things. They also can use it in digital world, but also in real world. If they go in a suppliers, they can show the smartphone with the QR code, and so they can be identified with a self-sovereign identity in the real world. It's very important to have a collaboration between public and private on this kind of subject, to have a legally recognized identity. And for this project, it's the Ministry of Agriculture in France which inject the data in the self-sovereign identity. So we also compare several technical solutions. And what I explain to my customers now, it's not what the technical solution to use, but what is the network you want to use. And the most advanced network for us in Europe is Alastria network. So we decide to use Alastria to implement this project in the next month. Thank you, Charles.
Antoine, thank you very much. And I really like the notion of the use case, because it's not the typical one where you think about opening up the bank account or proving that you're over 21 in a bar. It's really a fascinating use case. Thank you for that. Lastly, I'd like to turn to Yvonne. Yvonne, for your address, please. The floor is yours.
Hello. First of all, I'm very glad to be part of this panel. Let me say a few words about myself. So I've been around on the digital identity space for the, let's say, last 20 years. I feel old when I say that statements, but it's a reality. And I'm I'm co-founder and CTO of Validated ID. The company was founded in 2012. Our main business is digital signatures, but we have been very active on the self-sovereign identity space since, I would say, last 3 years. We are part of the Decentralized Identity Foundation. We are part of the Sovereign Network also. We participate in Alastria with my colleagues have been said. We're also part of INADBA. We also participate on the OPSI project together with Danielle de Soleil and many others. And for us, I would say our vision on SSI from the beginning was that interoperability is a key. I think that's very important to remark that it's a very good job that is done on the community. I would say that the standards on SSI will be something very important and necessary in order to evolve like a global adoption on that. And following this basis, we have developed our own SSI service, which is called BitChain, that nowadays we are piloting in different places, like in bank like BBVA or CaixaBank or some public administrations. So we are part of the SSI ecosystems. I would say that one of our special flavors, let's say, or specific focus is that as the SSI is something that is emerging and is something that is being constructed by many people, and it's a big effort. There are some gaps in there because there's something that needs to be done, and it takes time. And one of our specific tasks is we are trying to creating bridges to make things easy in order to have SSI adoption. So we have been working in different projects in that sense. So we have been part of the eIDAS Bridge project, which is a project also which is from the European Commission, that is trying to build technology that allows using SSI, reusing the trust that we have on the eIDAS or eIDAS certificates or eIDAS credentials. Right? So while this eIDAS regulation is not being adapted, which is on the way in order to use verifiable credentials, we have created this bridge in order to allow these kind of things. And also, we have collaborated on creating the first implementation on the Decentralized Identity Foundation of the OpenID protocol supporting SSI. That means that the most used worldwide identity protocol, which is used as Google Connect, Facebook Connect, these kind of things, also now supports connecting with SSI credentials, which I think it's a very important thing in order to make things easy for adoption. And the last thing that we're working on in different projects is building. We have already a wallet, and now we are building a wallet that is able to work with different ledgers in order to, because at the end of the day, I would say that users and people that's interested on use cases is not so much interested in if there is blockchain or there is a ledger or there is another ledger. People is about having services and making things in a different way that it's happening nowadays. So I think technology is very important, but it's very important that we try to deliver use cases on things that people may value. And this is not just about technology, it's about regulation, it's about privacy, it's about this kind of things. And this is the kind of things that we are addressing in Validated ID.
Yvonne, thank you very much. And I think the one point you've made about bridge, I just have to believe is so important. Really being able to bridge from the world of today to the world that will be is critical. Thank you for that. One thing is, I know there's a question had come in. Would you be willing to share the link to your wallet app? So that may be something for you to think about, and if you're supportive to include it in the chat. And
I will do.
But
okay,
good. Thank you. Whoever had asked that question, I think will appreciate that. Thank you. I'd like to now turn the table a bit to some of our questions, and I'd like to start with this topic of SSI and the killer app. I think we all know it's a bit of a loaded question because this is all about managing our digital life as we go. Many things that we're able to do with a digital identity wallet, but are there applications, categories of applications, or sectors that we think will propel the state of the market forward? And I'd like to start maybe to kick that one off, Yvonne, with yourself, to maybe your views, and then I'll invite the other panelists as well to really add in. We'll try to take about equal time, 5 to 7 minutes on each of these points. So Yvonne, maybe your view, how would you answer that? What's the killer app?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I think it's a very key question, right? So I think if we look about all the SSI adoption worldwide, I would say, in many cases, what we have is kind of pilots of proof of concepts, but we do not have yet a massive adoption or a lot of people using that. And I think we have now we are in a chicken egg problem, right? So because we are in a multi-site market where you need for one side the stakeholders that issue credentials to users, then you need these users to have these credentials, and then you need places where you can use that credentials for do these kind of things. And as there are no people issuing credentials, there is no people consuming credentials, and there is no user having credentials. So we are in kind of a chicken egg problem that it makes things a little bit more difficult. So I think there are different initiatives around, but in my opinion, answering to this specific question, I think that now with the COVID, we have a very good opportunity to have this killer application, because we need a killer application to make SSI explode, right? So once we have a use case where we can apply SSI, I think a lot of use cases will come around. And with COVID, it looks like it may be this killer application because there is a necessity in there. So because we have it, we need in order to, not just for travel, but if you would like to go to a soccer stadium or you will need to prove somehow that you are able to do these kind of things. And this is the kind of problems that SSI is solving. So if we look around, there are many initiatives in this topic. So different countries doing these kind of things. There are some pilots. IATA, for instance, is making IATA Travel Plus pilot. The European Commission has launched the Green Pass. The World Health Organization is also launching a pilot. Some are pure SSI pilots, let's say, or approach. Some other, I like to say, they are SSI on the way, right? Because some people is making some kind of shortcuts because we need to have something in place in some time. But I think it's following the SSI principles. But the good thing is that for the user perspective, that would be the SSI experience, right? So you will have somehow a credential that you will exchange with somebody online or in a face-to-face, and you don't like to share all your information. You just would like to share that you are able to enter in that stadium or to travel or make these kind of things. So this is the typical SSI use case, and I think as this will be a reality because it's a huge pressure on that. So then it can be a killer application that make that all other use cases around SSI maybe become a reality.
Great, Yvonne, really a good point, and it's one that certainly myself have been looking at. SSI technology really represents probably the way to solve this problem. This would be an incredibly hard problem to solve any other way. I'd like to open it up. Koti, Danielle, Yvonne, either points of view on Yvonne's point, yeah. Or are there other killer apps?
Well, I think I agree with Yvonne. It's we already discussed this case also in the European context. It is an opportunity because if you look at the key problem that we have with those credentials, those medical credentials, vaccination credentials, it would be perfectly fit. The only thing, but maybe I'm not brave enough to do that, is that case do you want to do that the first real great SSI case where things could be happening or could go wrong? Yeah? And this is a delicate matter. You already entered the space with medical data, which is the most sensitive aspect. Yeah? So maybe, but that again, maybe I'm not too brave to that. We should look also to the other cases that are less sensitive to do that. Yeah? But you need something, because people are using proof of concepts, but they are not entering the real production phase. Huh? And of course, that is what Yvonne clearly mentioned, the chicken of egg. SSI will be interesting if you have multiple things, if you have all your data and use it in different sectors and different things, then it will be able. Yeah, but before we reach out to that, it needs to have another level. What we are now looking at more is maybe you'll be having at the first stage maybe more domain-specific use cases of implementation, where a sector or business domain agrees on things and implements those kind of sectors. We see interesting projects like in Germany where they want to have an hotel check-in, and they combined every potential company that is related with that, try to configure that use cases. In the European aspect, we're looking also on social security. You put all the actors together and then they start to implement. You get a very specific domain-specific implementation, but that could be maybe the first step to implementation. And then we need to look, of course, how those kind of solutions go further. No? But you need the necessary agreements on that.
Danielle, thank you. Koti, it looked like you had your hand up. Maybe some comments. What
Yes.
does your crystal ball say? And there was also a question about university diplomas. What are your views?
So I agree with my colleagues. I see that in the short term, and that it's going to be massively used to avoid having so many passwords as well. Also, I believe that it's going to be very useful for validating studies, professional experience, and also for applying to online financing, for example. And linked to that, to online financing, in the longer term, I see self-sovereign identity as a killer app for trading with digital assets linked to the CBDCs, to the central bank digital currencies, and with DeFi. So I think it's a very, very important piece for decentralized finance. Imagine, for example, talking about uncollateralized loans. If we could have a credential saying that that you are a good payer, right? That you are going to pay your loans on time. So I think that that could be the killer app in the future.
Great. Koti, thank you. Antoine, any views on this one?
Yes. For my part, I'm on B2B use cases, and I think there is a lot of use cases very interesting in B2B, and we see it in the world of farmers. And it will be probably easier to have a critical mass of users on B2B, because for my part on AgData Hub, it's already created an ecosystem, and we involve a lot of partners in wine times. So farmers will be able to use self-sovereign identity with a lot of suppliers and administration and so on if we work well. So if it simplifies their life for administrative tasks, I think it will be a success. It will, if it's too difficult, but I hope not, they reject the thing. It's we need really to create something which simplify the life of people. I think this is the main key success, because the farmers are not necessarily geeks, so we have a challenge to simplify the use of self-sovereign identity.
It's really putting the technology below the covers, making it super simple.
Yes.
Antoine, thank you. I'd like to jump off to the next question, and it is quite related, which is really how do we scale and commercialize beyond current pilots? A lot of great work. How do we get to critical mass? And it is related to both pull on the application, but it may also relate how to go to market. And I'm wondering, Koti, maybe you could begin and talk to that. And by the way, there was a question directed particularly to you about how do you find agreement between companies that are competitors, between yourselves, Banco Santander and Gexa Bank, for example. So maybe you could think about addressing this notion of collaboration, and is that as well a key factor in commercialization, getting to scale?
Okay, thanks, Charles. So I see that there are different requirements that are needed in order to drive success and massive adoption. The three more critical ones are, first, the interoperability, that we've already talked a lot about it, no? So there should be a standardized mechanism to share and verify data across borders that enables full interoperability among different technical identity solutions. I used to say that this is like having tons of mushrooms appearing. Now it's like the thing that everyone is looking at, digital identity, but there are different solutions. So they should be interoperable between each other. So we need something comparable to the W3C in this way. Secondly, the cooperation between the public and private sectors to scale the ecosystem, which is, I think, obvious. We all agree on that. And third, governance, a governance that regulates the ecosystem and these standards. And there are other factors that are more obvious, but are also important. One that has to be cross-sectorial, so open to any business that wants to use it with their customers. And that's needed to achieve market penetration. That's why in Dalian, for example, we've got companies from different sectors. We were in that question talking about Caixa, but we also have to get an agreement with Repsol, right? Then we also need to be established legal and regulatory framework. So the solutions are recognized by the different authorities, for example, in terms of anti-money laundering, when you are identifying the clients. It has to be inclusive. As I said before, I think it's going to be key to operate in the digital economy. So we must ensure that anyone can benefit of using this identity. And very important here, it has to be supported by a compelling and positive commercial model to drive adoption across the private sector. So there should be initiatives for its development and for promoting its use among this sector, among the private sector. This is tricky because I mean, we don't want to create a data market, right? And start buying credentials of the users and things like that. So that's tricky, and we have to establish a way that we can compensate some of the companies for issuing credentials that they have to incur in a cost for getting that data, right? So I think that's going to be tricky, and it's part of that getting to agreement one with each other. And lastly, we always forget that it's the user experience. It has to be super appealing, easy, convenient to use. We have to focus on high value use cases for the citizens, and to ensure that they feel that this is trustworthy, that it's secure. So that's, I think, one of the things that users value the most. And regarding that collaboration between private companies, in our case in Dalian, it's I think it's quite easy. I mean, I'm surprised of that. We are all citizens, right? So when we work in this type of projects, we are also thinking of ourselves in an egoist way. Like, what do you want to have? What's the digital identity you want to use for what and how? So we are working on that, on the best user experience, because we are going to be the users. And this is about creating standards, infrastructure. So we are not here discussing about the business case. Each one of us is going to build our own business cases on top of this on top of this infrastructure, on this ecosystem, and there is where we are going to compete.
Koti, really fascinating, and it really brings to mind a thought I know I've had, which is almost this notion in an SSI model of an issuer, a holder, and a verifier. I think collectively you've brought up a number of points that are almost this fourth element of a governance authority, of a way to deal with regulatory matters, market making, economic matters, disputes. You think about this notion of tech migration from the old world to the new world. It almost begins to bring up that sort of notion, and an ability to almost bring collaboration to life, right? The orchestra conductor, if you might, right? So we've got the instruments there. Now we need to bring it together. But I'd ask maybe if any of the other panelists have a view on this topic. How do we scale and commercialize from here? If anyone has any other points.
Well, I think Koti is right. You need new business models. If you try to apply the current models that we have on, and maybe it's also related to your last question, how do big players come? With a monopoly or a strong centralization or control of data, this model doesn't work, and we don't want to do that. Yeah? So you need to rethink on other things, and you will be having more collaboration, and people will need to think about, okay, how can we monetize those kind of things? Because that's important. The gains are for the people that are verifying data, not for the ones that are issuing credentials. Right? They don't get paid. So we need to rethink those kind of things. That will not be easy, but it's the only way that we need to do that. And we need also to think, okay, if we scale up, how can this be, it's things that started in Spain or in other countries and is evolving in Europe, how can this be also be scaled in in a global context, with the same values, of course, because here we put clearly from in Europe that citizen in control, that we preserve his integrity, his personal sovereignty. We need to be sure that if this grows globally, that the same values also apply to that. So the government's model, if you apply also to democratic values, it will be a difficult case. But we need to be sure that that is also covered.
Great, Danielle, thank you. Listen, I'd like to maybe move on and talk a little bit about this notion of a public-private partnership, the evolution of EIDAS and SSI. I think we've heard the points from the panelists as we've gone, and I'm wondering perhaps the view of panelists. Is this a critical matter? Is it critical within the European community? How critical is that collaboration, public-private, outside the European community, and the view on that? Can government do it all? Can the private sector do it all? And if we agree that we've got to come together between public-private, how would that done? Danielle, maybe to lead off as you're doing some work in this field.
Yeah. Now it's clear from the things that I already said, the success factor of this is the public-private collaboration, because use cases, the most added value is indeed when you go cross-sector or you even go cross-border, or in combination of those kind of things. So you need to have something like that. Of course, it is also a difficult matter, and in my personal opinion, I think government can do a bit of facilitating this aspect and also support those kind of things. We have as government a lot of credentials that can be transformed to credentials that citizens can use in cross-sector. So as the government puts the first step to say, okay, we can give you that credentials that you can use in your own way with whatever you want, then maybe we can also create that. Next to that, of course, we can also help as governments to see, okay, how we build the necessary infrastructure. The common things that nobody likes to build and it's difficult to build, that is something that the public sector can help. But of course, that roads, if you want to call them, need to be driven. So private partners need to also to engage in that. And the last part that the government also can play a role in combination with whatever is, of course, we need to see how the regulation of these aspects can be managed. But we cannot build everything. So the end user solutions, the interaction with everybody, even if we build the other layers, need to be in an active collaboration with software solution providers, but also businesses, that's banks, and also ones that will use those services. So that is a big challenge that we have. I think, in my personal opinion, again, that Europe is also very facilitating for that we have a tradition to look at things at the public and private, that we are equal partners and do the best things for the citizens. So that is, it needs to be an integral part of that model and SSI. So I don't see that any sector in itself can do that alone. So you need to do that in open collaboration for the good of the citizens.
Danielle, there was a question from the audience really about the idea, just a very precise question about when do we start seeing EIDs issued as verifiable credentials? When do we start seeing this fit within EIDAS, right?
Yeah. Now, indeed, sorry, that was a part I forgot. So indeed, you have public-private, and within that regulation, indeed, the Europe EIDAS is important. We did a study where also Yvonne was mentioning that he did the technical part. We did an extensive study about, okay, how can the current EIDAS regulation be used for the SSI context? And we see that in very short term, you can do a lot within that regulation. But of course, now currently, there is a revision going on from the EIDAS aspect to see, okay, how can we transform that regulation so that it's more future-proofed? And it's also combined with the new, the thinking about the new European EID identity. In both cases, so in the revision and the European Digital ID, the SSI is inspiring a lot. You see that concepts on decentralized identity are currently also revised, maybe also put into that. So that will help also the transformation of that context. You will see that the same EIDAS trust levels high level of assurance and all those kind of things can be applied also to EID credentials. Yeah? So within the EPSI, we're also looking at how can EIDs, the base identities, if you call them, also issued as verified credential. We call them verified identities. They are mainly the cause, but you can have multiple in this model. There's also the power. I can be a Spanish citizen, but also Belgian citizens, and all those credential relate. So that will be also potentially a killer app that those credentials will be added. And then you go even further based on those kind of issues. Then you have multiple credentials issued and all to your wallet, and you can use it. So that is an evolution that is currently ongoing, and we'll hope to see in the next months, years, the results of those kind of things. And will give also the ecosystem some stability on the regulatory field.
Great. Thank you. And Antoine, Yvonne, or Koti, any other thoughts on this topic of public-private partnership to add?
I would say that with that on the previous question, I think that many of the discussions we are having here is use case driven, right? So it depends a lot on the use case, right? So if you think of, for instance, the business model, it will be, in my opinion, completely dependent on the use case. And I would say the same for the public-private collaboration. It will depend on the use case, how will be this kind of collaboration. But as Danielle pointed, I think in many use cases, maybe probably the most, this public-private key collaboration would be necessary, because if you think about the verifiable, the identity or the SSI identity, in most of the cases, you need a first verifiable credential, which Danielle has explained is this verifiable ID, which in the most cases, this credential will be issued by a government or by a public administration somehow, at least here in Western, because it's normally the kind of entities that handle this process. But also we need to think that the other way around also, because public administrations has a lot of integrations to consume credentials between all of them within their networks. But in many cases, for many use cases of the citizens, you need to provide credentials coming from the private entities to the public administrations. For instance, it's very typical coming here to the Coty business that I need to prove my bank ID account to a public administration. And doing that nowadays in a digital way is very complex, because there is no credential coming for the bank and there is no way to consume that for the public administration. So I think this kind of collaboration would be in both directions. So public, of course, public administrations will issue credentials that will be consumed by the private sector, but also I think it will be the other way also. I mean, I would like to present my credentials to public administration with SSI without having to bring papers or do things like I need to do that. And I think SSI will be a very disruptive in this kind of collaborations.
Great.
I'm plenty okay with Danielle and other speakers. It's what we see. We need a root of trust, and in 90% of cases, it will be from publics, and but publics have only one part of this of the information for a lot of use cases, and we have to merge a lot of claims to be able to complete a complete use case. So self-sovereign identity with it, public and private actor can work.
Maybe also to add to that, because the current solutions that we have, you know that governments can link data source and authentic sources together, but you cannot do that with the private sector. You cannot link internally behind that private sector to a public sector company or registry. So this model is something new. Put the citizen in the control, and then he can manage as many links that he wants. And you don't need to bother with too complex linking between a bank company or a bank registry and a government registry. Even in Belgium, we are a complex government. It's very difficult to link what we have at the federal government and the regional government and interchange your data. And maybe also you don't want to do that as a citizen. You don't want that behind your back data is interchanged without you knowing. So this model is also about, Antoine mentioned that, the simplification of certain process. It will be more simplified if the citizens arrange it itself. But at this current stage, it's only paper, wordless paper, where you cannot adjust any trust.
Well, good. Let's maybe move on. I want to maybe take a quick view. There was actually a question that had come in, and this is really related to big tech, but I'd like to take the audience question, which was, will this beautiful SSI allow me to get rid of all the added noise we have now in Web 2.0 from Facebook, from YouTube, or will we end up with the same thing? Are we going to find big tech coming to bear and dominating here, or do we truly get collaborative and we start getting a better digital life? Maybe Antoine, your quick views, and then we'll turn to Koti on this one.
I think self-sovereign identity is built to get back the data to the users. So if I want to connect to services, I don't have to ask to Google or Facebook to give my data to another services. I give my data with a direct link to the services. And I don't know what will be the reaction of Facebook on Google on self-sovereign identity, because it's some kind of risk of on the data they collect on us. But other big tech will be probably a big role on it, and I think to Microsoft particularly for B2B, because Microsoft, for a big part of us, we use a login password on a PC. It's managed by an Active Directory of Microsoft. And I think there is a big market for them to link self-sovereign identity with the world of company identity we use all days. But really, the self-sovereign identity is built to protect our data as citizens. We are able to manage who see it and who will use it, and not Google or Facebook.
Koti, maybe your views on this?
Yeah, so I think that social companies like, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and so would be as other companies, issuers, and service providers in this ecosystem. Our identity is formed of different attributes, and some of them are related to our social networks, right? So in this case, think of the example of Twitter wanting to verify the identity of a famous soccer player and having this tick that it's verified and he's the famous football player and not someone else trying to steal his identity. So they could use these credentials to verify that it's who this person is saying, as well as they could issue credentials about my email address. But if we think of the role of big techs like Google and Microsoft, for example, IBM, I believe they could play a crucial role in operating infrastructures, in operating the networks, and also providing technical mechanisms to prevent security failures and even enhance the security in the devices, because if we are thinking of wallets that are storing our credentials in a mobile phone, security is critical, and the weak piece is the mobile phone, right? Also, they could facilitate identity recovery processes. So the user can choose, for example, to use Google to have all the credentials encrypted as a backup system. So if I lose my mobile phone, I don't have to go over to all my issuers and ask for the same credentials again. Google could provide me an encrypted copy of them, right? So, those could be some of the roles that they could play.
Koti, thank you. I'm sensitive now to time. We have 4 minutes, and I got to tell you, a fascinating topic. I really appreciate as well all the comments from the panelists and the questions coming in from the audience, and we'll try to do our best in very, very, very rapid fire, some quick answers. Koti, there was a question that came in. What DLT is Alastria ID model based on?
So currently, it works with any Ethereum protocol, so Besu, Quorum, and so, and it's been adapted to be used as well with Hyperledger Fabric.
Okay, that's really, really, really super. Second question, a lot of DID methods have come up in the last couple of years. How do you see interoperability across these methods? Danielle, your view, very quick on this one.
That is, of course, a challenge. You
Yeah.
have a very evolving market. We see a very interesting solutions, also new protocols. People are now also working on things that even doesn't need a big ledger. You have a personal ledger, so it needs a bit stabilize in the next aspect. But that version 2 will be very important. So I hope that in the next months we get some more stable thing, and we need to constantly work on interoperability. Right? There will be new things that evolve, but they need to be interoperable with each other. Yeah? So
okay, great. We've got a few other points here, but I'm just wondering in wrapping up, and unfortunately, there's a few things we won't have time for my panelists that are involved. Any other final points that you'd like to bring up or to clarify? Antoine, starting with you, very, very quickly, 30 seconds.
Yes, I think it will be clearly a revolution if we success to have the critical mass of users, and it's what we are trying to do in the next months and years.
Great, thank you, Yvonne.
So I would say we are in a very relevant moment of time for SSI. It's been in the round for a while. But I think we need to jump from some theoretical or some small pilots to more massive use cases. I think we have the basis, but we need to make this jump all together. I think we are on a good path, but it needs to happen in the following months.
Okay.
Yes, Yvonne said, I mean, this is the hot topic right now, but I would encourage all companies and governments to collaborate even more, because I think that's the key requirement, and we all have experts in our companies that can help to build this all together.
Great. And Danielle.
Okay, so as closing, it's not only about technology. It will be also about governments, but also regulation. If you want to have that SSI principles putting the user in control, we need also to think how to protect the citizens, how to have that very aspect of data exploitation, asymmetrically organization and those kind of things. How can we tackle those kind of things? If not, technology will be interesting, but it will be implemented in a whole other way that we thought it would be. So we need to keep that in mind. And that is also something the government can play an important role in this.
Thank you, Danielle. I heard 4 words through the course of this, and to keep it simple, I heard the word collaboration early on from Coty, very important. I heard from Danielle the word interoperability, really key. I heard from Antoine the point of simple, simple, simple for the user. Most people are not tech geeks. And then lastly, I heard from Danielle the word bridge, being able to bridge from here to there. I'd also say that commercialization, making this relevant and working public-private is probably pretty key. With that, Victoria, I turn to you. Thank the panelists and the audience. Great session today.